In this next movie, I want to touch upon ePubStyles. So ePubStyles are in some respects similar to paragraph styles or character styles or object styles as you find them in InDesign. So styles are a way to group a whole lot of settings in one compact named entity and then refer to it by name. And when you refer to a paragraph style, you're essentially calling in a whole lot of settings and configuration options like font and font size and color and so on under one name. And ePubStyles are essentially the same thing. So a single name represents a whole lot of settings in a whole specific way on how to convert a file to an EPUB. So when you decompress EPUB crawler, you can simply run EPUB crawler and it'll use an EPUB style called default. So what I'm doing now is I'm just running EPUB crawler on this test document, and it has generated this EPUB folder here, test file CS5. And when you look at, say, page 1, I have a quick look. See, so that looks fairly similar to the test document I had there. So it has some frames with text in it and some images. And when I look at the CSS and the XHTML in a text editor, the things to look at is, for example, here I have a P11, so a certain div, which contains an image, and then there's another one here, P16, which contains essentially, it's a reference to a similar image. So essentially they're based on the same image file, the same original image file, but the different scaling. So this is one way to do an EPUB. Essentially, you have divs and you have the images as tags within the divs. See, and the formatting via CSS is I have P11 with a certain size, and then within P11 I have an image with a certain size. So that's how one could do an EPUB one way. So what I'll do now is I'll just keep this test file CS5 there. But I'll just go and reconfigure ePub crawler. So what I need to do is I need to open up that config.ini file, which determines how ePub crawler works. And I open it, and all I'm going to do is change the ePubStyle setting. So ePubStyle contains a name, in this case the name is default, which refers to a folder somewhere in the ePubStyles folder within the ePub crawler template folder. So in all these separate subfolders, default, images, BKG, page background, percentages, and so on, there are different ePub styles. So the one I want to use to show you how different the result can be just based on the ePubStyles page background. So if I now change my ePub style to page background, so all I'm doing is changing the config.ini, saving it, closing it, and now I run my ePub crawler again on the exact same document. Okay, once it's done, I hide InDesign. See, now I have a second ePub folder here, test file cs55_1. Open that second ePub folder, and first let's look at the result. P1. See, like, it looks very similar to what we got in the first try, but it is actually quite different because all those frames that we saw in the first sample are worked out completely different. So, and you'll see the difference once we open up the HTML and the CSS. So as you can see here, there are no more references to those two images. So all I see is just the P12 up to P110. There are essentially references to the text frames, always the word test, 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 test. Nothing but text frames with a test in it, the word test in it, and one single image, which is a background image. So what ePub crawler has done now with this setting is to take a page, remove all the text from the page, and then export the whole page as a single page-wide graphic. So it's a single page in a single graphic. And this bg_p1.jpg is the whole page, the graphics of it, so minus the text. The text is then put on top, just with standard HTML and CSS. See, and that results in quite a different HTML and quite a different CSS, but it has quite a few advantages. So let's look at page 2 in the InDesign document. See, like page 2 here, I have a frame, a green frame with some text in it, and that frame is kind of transparent, so I can actually see the images behind it a little bit. And if I look at the result in the first export that we made with ePubCrawler with the default setting, you see the green frame is not transparent at all, it's just a green blob with some text in it. Whereas if I look at the second trial, you do see that the green frame actually is a semi-transparent frame. Now it's all make-believe, it's not real, because all that happened is that ePubCrawler made the page background, which has the semi-transparent green frame, but minus the text, because we cannot really mimic the exact formatting of text from InDesign in HTML. So we keep out the text, do only the background with any frames, image frames, and then put the text on top. So that has a distinct advantage of maintaining things like transparencies or opacities and so on. The disadvantage, of course, is that you don't, the frames in the background are fixed in position. So in the first export, if I made changes, I could actually move and resize those text frames, and they would resize nicely. Whereas for the second trial, so if I look at this in Firefox, so here actually this word test is sitting on top of a background border, so that border is actually implemented as the page background. Whereas if I look at the P1 of the first export, see, and the two are virtually identical. I'm switching between the two. See, the one, but in this case, is the border is actually a CSS border. It's done in CSS. It's colored in CSS. See, so with ePubStyles, you can switch very quickly between two or multiple different ways of creating the EPUB, and which one is okay for you is totally up to what you're trying to achieve. There are a few EPUB styles that are pre-made, so these are the EPUB styles I made up. Now, in the next video I'll show you how to create your own EPUB style, but all I want to do with this video is just show you a little bit of how those EPUB styles work without going into too much detail. Say, for example, if I open up that page background EPUB style, you see it only has 3 files. Now, the reality is that ePubCrawler needs a whole lot of snippet and CSS and INI and so on files, and formulas file. It will normally take those files from the OEBPS folder inside the ePubCrawler template folder. You see, here's the script, ePubCrawler.jsx-bin. Next to the script we have the ePubCrawler template folder, and inside that folder we find OEBPS, which is the parent folder of the OEBPS folder in all the EPUBs we'll be exporting. And that folder is filled with snippets and other configuration files. Now the page background EPUB style actually overrides a little bit of information from that OEBPS folder. So in this case it's actually taking a slightly different tack to creating an image frame CSS and the text frame CSS. And the config.ini is also essentially an override of the config.ini in the OEBPS, or the config.ini here in the ePubCrawler folder. So what I'll do first is I'll open up those two config.inis so you see the difference. See, so this is the main config.ini, the one we've just modified to say ePubStyle is page background. See, and then the config.ini inside that ePubStyle folder, all it says is image handling equals 2, whereas normally image handling equals 1. So the config.ini in the ePubStyle folder called page background is a limited version which only specifies what is different than the default. So the default being image handling 1, it actually says image handling 2, and if you read the comments it actually explains that that creates page backgrounds. What is different as well is, for example, the text frame. So let's just look at the text frame from the ePubStyle and the standard text frame snippet and compare them side by side. See, so this is the ePubStyle, essentially the ePubStyle text frame, And there I do things like, for example, set the background color to transparent, make the border color transparent, the border style solid, so the border is still there, but it's totally transparent. So I still need the width. I want the width of the border to count, but I don't want to see the border because the background will take care of the border. And the border width is still the border frame border weight pixels, like a placeholder. Compare that to the standard default text frame CSS snippet. There I do have some frame background color CSS and some frame border color CSS. So this is CSS expressions that generate the necessary CSS to get the color border and background and the border width. But so in the page background one, I made the border transparent. So that's the main difference. I made the border transparent and also the frame itself transparent, such that we can actually see the page background shine through the text frame. So two totally different EPUB styles, but the main thing to remember is that I normally get all the files out of OBPPS except when they're overridden by the EPUB style. So look at a few of the other ones. Say, for example, I have images BKG, so that's another one where I have a few extra formulas just for the images in the background. So images BKG is an EPUB style where the images are not done through nested image tags, but instead as background images to the div tag, which is an alternate way. So I found that it doesn't really work well with most EPUB readers, but it's just still there. It's an option. So you can handle the images differently. The whole idea is to eventually have a whole lot of EPUB styles, and you can make your own, but I can imagine that you might have EPUB style called Kindle and another EPUB style called Nook, and another EPUB style called Hi-Res or whatever, so you can set up your own EPUB styles. It's extremely configurable, but it's also not extremely easy. So, and that's why I'll do the actual creation of EPUB styles in a different video. So, but I hope this introduced you a little bit to the EPUB styles. The main thing to remember from this video is that if you want to switch EPUB styles, go and find the config.ini file, which I've moved to the EPUB crawler 021 folder. So I've moved it up a few levels since previous versions. You open up that file and just change the EPUB style to refer to one of the subfolders of the EPUB styles folder. So, and by changing that, you will create quite a different EPUB style. And compare one to the other and see whether it suits, and you can quite often figure out a way to actually merge two of the styles and make it do exactly what you want.